How do I even write an introduction to a video about 9/11? I think about it as if this terrorist attack in 2001 needs no introduction, but enough years have passed now that there are plenty of people watching this video who have no first-person memories of what happened. That being said, it often fails to make it into most history books. And in your average American history course, the teacher will run out of time before getting to 9/11. So today, let's do it. Let's talk about what happened on one infamous September morning in 2001. Who planned it, how it went down, and how it had a major impact on the history of the 21st century. First, let's talk about 9/11's chief architect, a Palestinian man named Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Often called KSM by those in intelligence and the military, he advised and gave money to a different attack on the World Trade Center in 1993, one that was not officially an operation by Al-Qaeda, but with a lot of overlap. In the 1990s, Al-Qaeda was changing. After relocating to Afghanistan, bin Laden pushed Al-Qaeda for more significant and ambitious attacks. In 1998, an unrecognized fatwa, or Islamic legal decision by bin Laden, declared holy war upon the United States, and Al-Qaeda blew up 2 embassies in East Africa. More on this period of Al-Qaeda's life here. This is where Khalid Sheikh Mohammed entered the story. In 1996, he brought the plans for 9/11 to bin Laden. A few years later, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed got permission to get started with his funding. They began to recruit their 19 hijackers based on their experience with piloting airplanes, their English skills, or having spent time living in Western countries. During this time, the plan did get picked up by various intelligence organizations. The NSA had intercepted messages about it, the CIA was tipped off by the Saudi intelligence service. However, and the 9/11 Commission report bears this out in agonizing detail, these organizations were not talking to each other. The intelligence they gathered wasn't shared, and so they were never able to piece the whole plan together. It did at one point make it into the daily briefing for President George W. Bush, but no one chose to act on it. This sort of intelligence without much to move on wasn't taken as seriously before 9/11, and so there wasn't any response. Intelligence folks also assumed this would be an attack on a US embassy in a place such as Saudi Arabia or Israel, not entirely piecing together this might happen on American soil. The attack began early in the morning of September 11th, 2001. The 19 trained hijackers boarded 4 planes armed with utility knives, mace, tear gas, and the threat of bombs. All of the aircraft were heading to California as they'd likely have few passengers aboard and be loaded up with fuel, turning the plane into a flying bomb. 2 of the planes crashed into the 2 towers of the World Trade Center complex, causing massive structural damage. The kinetic force of the aircraft knocked off a lot of the fireproofing, and the burning fuel was able to heat the metal in the building to the point they lost their structural integrity. Like something from a superhero movie, the towers crashed to the earth, sending a massive cloud of dust around Manhattan. The debris from the collapsing 110-story buildings knocked out an enormous part of a neighboring building, World Trade Center 7, causing its collapse as well. One plane hit the Pentagon, causing a massive amount of damage to one side. Given the hard target and the fortress design of the building, defense people quickly rebuilt it. And the last flight, Flight 93, was overrun by the passengers, crashing the plane in a field in Pennsylvania, killing everyone on board. Further interrogations of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed have shown this failed plane was intended for the US Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Overall, about 3,000 people died that day. Fun segue, I'm having an event this weekend on September 8th, 2018. Yeah, so if you're watching this in September 8th, 2118, I probably won't be there. Or if I am, I will be a robot. Anyway, it's going to be in Toronto. It's going to star me and much more importantly, the much more talented Mexi and Thought Slime. And it's going to happen at a bar called Disgraceland, which is on Bloor Street. So just, boop, boop, boop it into your Google Maps and come pay us a visit. Starts at 7 p.m. Reactions were earth-shattering and came to redefine the US and the world going forward. All flights were grounded. The story of some of those stranded people became a huge musical. First responders across the country rushed to New York City to help. Blood donations spiked, Spider-Man had to edit its theatrical print. It was a whole thing. I know if you have any memories of 2007, this will sound weird, but George Bush had a 90% approval rate, and used it to pass a whole slew of counterterrorism laws which were extremely infringing upon people's civil liberties and freedoms, such as warrantless wiretapping, and eventually whatever monster PRISM is right now. The most significant piece of legislation is called the USA Patriot Act, and it enjoys bipartisan support to this day because Americans have no one to vote for. Also, the city of New York's mayor was Rudolph Giuliani, and he enjoyed a considerable boost to his reputation before he descended into a racist goblin man. To address the holes in the intelligence sharing, the CIA, FBI, and NSA took some actions to increase coordination, but the biggest one was the founding of the Department of Homeland Security. You might know them as the ones who have the authority to break into your suitcase for some reason. And of course, the land of individuality and freedom of religion turned to one of its favorite pastimes: collective blame and hate crimes. Yep, Muslims, or anybody who looks like one, were exposed to tons of violence and discrimination. Brown people were kicked off airplanes, and despite near unanimous condemnation by the American Muslim community, they are still experiencing discrimination and hate crimes until...
I think Islam hates us.
Charming. There was also an outpour of support from around the globe for the United States. But don't worry, that wouldn't last long. Al-Qaeda had given America a bloody nose, and a week later the United States had announced a war on terror against Al-Qaeda and basically like all terrorism. It's a nebulous war concept which will let the US invade anywhere for any reason at any time, which came in handy when the US invaded Iraq less than 2 years later for what turned out was no reason besides imperial hegemony. But Al-Qaeda had very little time to enjoy its victory. The United States and the entire world really were after them. And the story of that will be in the conclusion to this series of the history of Al-Qaeda, which will come out next week. Oh yeah, this is part 3 of a 4-part series. Why don't you click the thingy and watch the whole one? Session time. Thank you to 12 Tone for the tunes, and I need to thank my patrons. There's now so many of them I have to use my iPad. Don and Carrie Johnson, Michael Kirshner, Martin King, Scott Smith, Luis Inez Guarita, Mary D'Onofrio, say hi to Vincent for me, James McNeese, and Garrett Kwan. Like, share, subscribe, end communication.